Welcome to the Scale Ups podcast, where each week you get to hear Sean Steele, professional CEO, growth mentor, and advisory board chair, unpack the strategies that successful founders have used to achieve scale in their businesses. Stay tuned as he interviews the entrepreneurs who've made it, learns from industry experts, and follows a group of founders still striving to scale.
G'day everyone, and welcome to the Scale Ups podcast, where we help first-time founders learn the secrets of scaling so they can make bigger decisions with more confidence and maximize the value and impact they can create in the world. And I am your host, Sean Steele, and my guest today, I'm very excited to have Brad Beer on from BMT Tax Depreciation. How are you, Brad?
Great, Sean, and great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Mate, I'm very excited to have this conversation. You know that from our conversations offline that I'm a bit of a passionate property investor, and so I feel like I've had Brad Beer in my life for quite a long period of time, because if I was to go through my inbox for the last 15 years, I'd have a lot of BMT emails in there. So
Look, there's also a person behind them, not just an email. And 24 years I've been at BMT, so you've been getting them for a while.
Indeed, mate. No, it's been great, and I've connected with many members of your team. And so, for those who aren't familiar with BMT, I'll just give a quick bit of an overview. So, if I've got this right, Brad, the business kicked off in '97, so that'd be 25 years this year. Is that right?
Yes.
You're having a bit of a party?
25. So I started a year later, but yes, it kicked off in 97.
97. All right. And so you were a quantity surveyor for BMT in 98, and you became a director and a shareholder 4 years later in 2002. So that would be 20 years ago, I guess, this year. And then you became CEO of the business 7 years ago in 2015. And so BMT, for those who don't know the brand, BMT helps residential investors and commercial owners claim maximum property deductions, I guess, is probably the key focus. So you're actually quantity surveyors. You specialize in tax depreciation schedules, and you've now got staff in every state, right? So you cover the whole nation.
We're staff all over the place. There's about 180 of them at the moment, and
wow.
Need a few more at the moment. Actually, it's a bit rough.
Oh, we're recruiting. Okay, we'll have to put the CCAD link up at the end of the podcast. So, do you truly go everywhere? Is there anywhere in Australia that your team doesn't go? Like, what about the sort of remote parts of WA or NT? Like, what happens when you get a call from there?
So we go everywhere. I mean, we need to make it viable in some way to get there. So if you are in, examples would be Port Hedland, Kalgoorlie. Mm-hmm. These are areas that we don't go to every week, but we do get to them because if there's only one property and it's 20,000 kilometres from anything, then I'm sorry, unless you pay me heaps of money, I'm probably not coming there because I've got to cover the guys. But we just put a bunch of jobs together in those distance areas. We always do them with our own guys and girls, our own staff, and we sort of look. When someone tells you where their suburb is, and you hear that pause, it's probably a long way away, and we explain. And the thing about it is they're then understanding. They realise they're a long way away. They want to get professional jobs done by people that are experts in fields. There's not one in that area. They realise that sometimes they've got to wait, and we get by with that, and they're understanding most of the time. I'm
sure they're used to it. I'm sure actually pre-Google that sound of the pause would have been somebody grabbing a stack of Gregory's and trying to pull it out and going, where is that suburb? Probably a bit faster these days. And so how many depreciation schedules would your team have done now? Because you've got 180 team members. That's quite a lot.
We have, and obviously, we didn't do many of them at the start per year. We've done over 750,000 of them, not quite 800,000, somewhere in between there. So, we've seen a few houses.
Learned a thing or two after doing the same thing 700,000 times, I reckon.
Yes, and our best ever year was just under 70,000 in 1 year.
Right.
So
okay.
That's a fair few depreciation schedules.
Absolutely. And would BMT be number one by a long way? Like, who's the sort of number? What's the closest competitor in terms of size, like in terms of scalability?
Look, there's no exact knowledge on that because we don't have somewhere that everyone shares their numbers. But
of course,
I do have a pretty good idea, and it's probably about a fifth the number of us.
A fifth, yeah. Okay.
So,
number one by a long way.
It could be a quarter if they've been doing all right lately, but it's roughly those sort of numbers. So we hold about half of the market share is probably the case. And so, yeah, fair few of them. It's very cottage, very lots of operators that do a few, and we've sort of gone in and obviously done a lot more.
And was there do you remember there being a moment in time where you guys said, we have to be number one? I mean, many people will have heard the sort of old adage of, well, if you're not going to be number one or two in your market, then don't bother. Like, you're just going to be outcompeted. You're going to end up with skinny margins. You're not going to get any advantages. Like, how important was being number one to BMT, and was it a very conscious thing, or did it just sort of evolve that way?
Well, I think because the numbers aren't shared around our industry that necessarily, we started, and in saying that, I came in a year later, but with the guys that became my partners, we went in. We just were trying to grow each year. I think the first year they didn't turn over enough money to pay anybody, and the second year I was actually still at uni, and I think it was about 5x, then 3x, then 3x again, sort of, and we were just in there having a solid crack, growing and working hard. And in reference to your question, I think I remember probably, I don't know, I'll say 7 or 8 years in, going to meet who we thought was the biggest competitor, and having and it might have been 10 years in, and having a discussion, and we didn't really know how many jobs they did. And then there was all the discussion with an old gentleman who's a lovely guy about how he'd like to, maybe merge and teach us a thing or two. And then he told us how many jobs he did. And I'm like, oh, that's disappointing. It was less than us last year. And you've been doing this for 30 years. You've been in it for 6 or something, So,
yeah.
I don't think there was a conscious point or moment. But then we realized we had traction, and we'll talk about growth and non-growth, I suppose, at some point. I'd love to, Sean, today. But for nearly 20 years, I had a business that grew every single year without fail. And it was growth on growth, and we don't have a recurring revenue. So, on the 1st of July, I get another guy comes back if he buys another property, but the one property's done and it's projected. You don't pay me again next year. So I always say it's like the 1st of July, we start again. We have to go and get what we got last year and grow on top of that, one-off jobs. Obviously, same referrers do come back when they buy more properties, or the accountant refers again if we do a good job, but they're not forced to, and they don't need to pay for the same thing again next year, like insurance or other things in relation to your property.
I know. I understand the business model very well, having spent a long time in education and the vast majority in non-recurring revenue models. So yeah, it was always okay, great. We might have got 30 million last year, but how do we get we have to get that same 30 million from somebody else, and then we've still got to grow on top of that.
It's a challenge, but bring it on, I say.
Yeah. And so I'm interested in the number one position. I mean, that's number one leader by quite a margin. What practical benefits do you think have accrued to you by being number one?
Well, as we've grown, I guess if you looked at some of the reasons behind growth, and there's lots of things that we can talk to around that, but if I looked at one of the very simple things that I remember sitting through a presentation probably 20 years ago or more now, where someone said you need to innovate and blow them away. So if you look at those two things, we need to be ahead, we need to innovate, we need to be faster, we need to be better, we need to be more digital in some way, and also blow them away. We need fantastic client experiences, especially when I operate completely on referrals. You don't have to come and pay me next year. I need to find another one of you, right? In order to do those things well, we're able to, based on scale, have some money to spend on developing IT services. I had internal IT guys. I think the first one started the best part of 20 years ago when we were a fairly small business. It was a big step. But then having large IT teams building things that help us to do things quicker, easier. We get these quantum leaps when they build some particular IT thing that saves us 1 minute per job. It makes a difference. Now, without I guess our size, it's hard to do that from an innovation point of view, from the client experience point of view. I get to spread it across more jobs, and therefore I'm able to, I guess, spend a bit on making sure that we can be at the front. and we can be the best that someone in this industry can be. We can be ahead of the research the most, and we can spend some things. We don't build a system and then use it. We continually evolve it, and how do we make it better? And we also get to do a lot of, I'm a big believer in measuring everything to the T. If we don't measure it, it either doesn't get done or it doesn't get managed. And my managers of teams will always go, so don't bring Brad a number unless you bring same this month, last month, same month last year to date last year to date this year, and it's pink if it's nice, or green if it's good, and pink if it's going backwards. We're either getting better or why not? Better, faster, more conversion, or whatever it is in pretty much all aspects of our business when we can.
Well, you sort of alluded to my next question, because there's elements, two of my next questions, one which is about differentiation and the other one which is about technology. And they're not necessarily the same thing, but of course, one might play a part in the other. How has the business thought about differentiation? And I noticed that you have a bit of a brand promise as well. Can you talk to me a bit about sort of differentiation and brand promise and how you've tried to carve out a stronger space for yourselves?
Yeah, and look, differentiation, I suppose on brand promise, that's pretty simple. Double the fee or it's free guarantee, I think is what you're referring to. Like, as far as doing what we do well, we are there to find tax deductions. If we don't find tax deductions, then you shouldn't pay us any money, right? And with a bit of a look at a property based on a few questions, we can work out whether it's worth it. And then from there, given that we've done 750 plus thousand of these things, I should be able to work out whether it's worth it, and I should back my choice on that based on the minimal information that I do have at my fort. Like, we can see photos of the property usually, a bit of information, a few questions. Are we going to get enough out of it? If we're not, we get it wrong, we'll give you back your money and we'll move on in life. I'd like to work that out as soon as possible, not when I've finished the job, of course. And sometimes we give the money back, but we've got to back ourselves, I suppose, is the thing there. So, and I guess the differentiation thing, that's, given that we've got, I guess, we've all got, in my space, we've all got the same rules. We've got a set of tax rules, and quantity surveying is measuring and counting bricks and cost estimating. You've got to learn first how to do that right and do it perfectly. Make sure you apply every rule the way you can to maximise that deduction and do a job thoroughly. Thorough is a word I use regularly. What's different? We're thorough. I'm not the cheapest guy. I don't cut anything out of the process. I don't try to do it without going to site. I don't try to cut a corner. We charge what we do charge in order to make sure we get it right. You're a property investor. You're after money. You'd want to get the maximum deductions. You don't want to get in trouble with the tax office. So making sure we're actually thorough in what we do is important. The differentiation factors, how do I do that? I employ my own staff to go to site. I make sure they're trained to pick up everything. I go to site all the time. I don't, I can measure it off the plans maybe, and there's a few changes in the last few years that means that could be easier, but it's not getting everything.
Do a lot of competitors do that? Do it sort of virtually and don't attend site?
Since COVID, because it's pretty hard to go to site. I'm not going to say it was fun, trying to hold the line and make sure we get everything 100%. We had to ring lots of clients and say, I'm sorry, lockdown again, and say we can't do your job, but we want to do it properly and maximise your deduction. Do you want to wait a little bit more time so we can get it done right and get more money for you? Or do you want a half job? Now, through COVID, there's always been some that, and you know what? I can make an estimate based on some photos as well. Will it be as good? Most of the time, no. Will I get everything? In 100,000 jobs we did since the changes and lockdown that we assessed, based on those whole 100,000, not a sample of, that we visited, we found that 66% of the time they've had some sort of renovation that can qualify for deductions. If I did it off the original information from some other time, I would miss that.
Wouldn't have seen it.
And because we still visited them, we know that we get those deductions and the client gets more money, and they just had to wait a little while, and it made my job a whole lot harder, or our jobs. So making sure that we're getting everything has been important to us all the time. Through COVID, rather than being, 1 out of 5 quantity surveyors you ring will say, maybe we don't need an inspection. It's probably more like 3 out of 5 now, because it was easier. But I we won't get the same result. And I have more data on that than anybody else does because I've still been visiting them through that process. So, now, I guess from an innovation point of view, also from a point of difference, we've tried to build things over time that make it easy. I know making things easy is what's been a big part of how we've taken or helped to create the market share, because before we were around, the accountant maybe that needs to refer and get this, it may have been hard, it may have been slow, it may have been, who do we get to do this? We went in and produced good experiences so that the client, the accountant has a comfort that they get these reports from BMT, they're good, they've learned how to do them properly, and then after that, things like portals that allow them to be easily see all of their client stuff that we've built, update reports. Like I sit around and spend my time wondering how I can make depreciation easier for accountants and clients. And that, I guess, some of those things that we've applied forever, and how do we make the experiences better? Those are the things that we try to make as points of difference in a world where we have the same rules as everybody else as far as how something should be done. We've just got to learn how to apply them and make sure we do them well on the way through.
And do you feel like some services businesses, end up implementing technology to enable a better customer experience, and then some use technology to sort of lead? They almost become sort of technology-led services businesses as opposed to services-led technology businesses. How do you think about the business in terms of where tech sits in the mix now?
I think that the technology needs to be something that helps us to do it quicker, faster, better, more quality assurance, etc. But it also needs to enhance the client's experience with your business. And I think, and this could be a bit rough, but I think so many boardroom tables, there is technology implemented in business that's only about the bottom line or only about ease for us. And I think that is lost to the consumers so badly as a consumer in the world, not just in the property space, in general. Yeah. Simple things like, I don't know, the coffee shop that I have an account at last week, put a new system in because it's all whatever. I used to go in there, I had 4 numbers I had to remember and say, thanks, Brad. Now I have a 10-digit number to try to remember each time and it's too hard. So I have to pay every time. It's not a major issue, but that piece of technology probably made it easier for them. But I want to buy my coffee somewhere else. And I think that gets lost a lot on it might start with going towards the consumer, but I think it often ends up the other way. And we've got to run businesses and work out how to make them work in this technology world as well. We can't lose sight of the client experience or we will lose as business owners.
And so, Brad, over this period of time, and we'll talk about the challenges of the last couple of years, which weren't obviously just COVID related. You had some big legislative changes that have been sweeping through the Australian investment property market. And but if your trajectory will never have been linear. It's going to have like everybody's trajectory. I'm sure when you spread it out on a graph and you take it over a long period of time, it looks usually nice and smooth and like a sort of fast growing curve. But then when you zoom in, it's like just a set of jagged peaks and troughs, where you have good periods that goes really fast and it goes backwards and up and down and up and down. When you think about some of the things that have really changed the trajectory, decisions, mindsets, investments that you've made, things that have fundamentally shifted the way the business has been able to grow or how quickly it was able to grow, what have some of those things been?
So we grew We've done growth on growth up until the legislation change we're talking about every year. And I look at a graph of that growth, some years a bit quicker. And I guess, if I looked at, the GFC would be one challenge, I suppose, that we faced. We went through the GFC. We looked at, it was all a bit scary. The world was, having financial ruin and we're a property related business. The US wasn't doing too well with that. Things like that could be impactive. We cut expenses to the bone. We worked hard. We didn't cut marketing expenses or business development expenses. And we did one of our best years. We hurt for it because we didn't really have enough people to do it. But we're going to take this on. And we managed, when I say one of our best years, one of our good percentage growth years with the people we had, and even probably quite good in profits, because we didn't have enough people to do it. So we all just worked hard, and everyone was a bit concerned through that time. So we did that. I'd have to say there's that in the early days, the way we grew our business was actually largely through education and creating a market. And it's all...
What do you mean by that?
So when we started doing depreciation, just what we've done a lot of over the time is education. I go out and talk to people about tax depreciation and this deduction and the real estate industry, this deduction you can get, and most investors aren't doing it properly. Some of our research shows 80% aren't maximising the deduction. So there's a deduction.
Really, still?
There's a government rule that says you can claim it, and you leave it on the table for whatever reason. You don't know, you think you've got a good accountant, you think it's too old, you listen to the guy at the pub that told you that, and there was a market that wasn't tapped. Now, the accountants knew it was there, maybe didn't know some of the rules as well as they should, and were scared of where to get it. So we went out to the consumer via the real estate industry and to the accountants to say, we're here to do it. There's deductions there that you're missing out on. How about we give you an idea of how much that might be and see if you can go and get some back from the tax office. You can back claim for 2 years if you've been missing out. So we we didn't take our market share from someone else. We helped to create it, I suppose. I guess the market was there, but no one was really doing it because they hadn't really educated the people that it was there, I suppose. Because we relate to new buildings that are being built and sold to investors or by investors, and transactions of properties to an investor. So the transactions are important to us. Back in those days, we had the benefit of we're finding another accountant who then trusts us and referring us next year. And on the back of when the properties do boom or the investment market booms, back in the days when 45 to 50% of the transactions went to investors, geez, I remember those days. Then there was a lot of opportunity out there. And as we grew and got accountants to trust us and told investors they should stop leaving their money at the tax office for those guys to spend, because I think we like it better, then we continued to grow through that period of time. As we've gotten bigger, we then our numbers each year become closer to the number of transactions that happen. And you start to get towards that, saturation of that market. And then you're back into, like, a lot of our growth was, making the market saturated. Growth gets harder for us as the market got saturated by us, effectively.
Rod for your own back.
I think there's certain points where we went from an IT perspective, and so, like, sometimes the IT department over the years feels like the black hole while they build stuff, and then they do something and it saves 5 minutes per job. And you go, wow, that's awesome. Look how much quicker we can scale up without having to throw more, ridiculous numbers of people at that. And we on a smaller IT team at the moment continue to work on the ways and innovate to make sure that we can do something that, enhances the client experience or makes it quicker for us to do. One of those two things are very important.
I love that. And those, people go, oh, wow, 5 minutes, surely that's not really game changing. Well, when you're trying to scale a services business, there's a few things, right? One, you have to do it with quality every single time. Otherwise, your brand's going to suffer pretty quickly. And you've just talked about a whole bunch of ways that you've continued to focus on innovation and the client experience to ensure that quality's there every time. And then two, that internal efficiency as a second point in time. I remember in having large scale contact centers for salespeople, and I remember I sat down and I sat beside them for a couple of days and just watched everything that they did, because I was like, we could be focusing on conversion rates and leads and blah blah blah, but I know this is not efficient. And I just watched for a couple of days, and I was literally sitting there with a pen and paper, and I was counting how many minutes were happening in between the calls and what was happening after the calls. And what I discovered was, it must have been, 60% of the time you're leaving a voicemail. And I was like, well, that's a really massive waste of about, probably 2 minutes per call. And so we automated personalized voicemails so that it came from the person, it was their voice and so on, but they were just a standardized sort of format, which we didn't need to do anything more clever than that. And then it was reducing that time in between those two calls. It wasn't actually trying to improve the time on the phone. We could help them in the same amount of hours without having to work a single extra minute in the day, get connected to a hell of a lot more calls by reducing all of this time. Okay, which screen are they looking at, and why do they go to that application? What are they doing in that one? And how do we make that part faster? And it was incredible how big the impact was, to your point, without having to just throw, more warm bodies, at the.
and we've had we've had our guys, our IT people sit next to someone who's actually doing exactly what you're saying, and go, is there anything you can automate in this process? And look, you think back, I mean, I remember the days where we had the guys in Perth would go to the site, take photos, and then they'd send back their notes and their photo card, and they get lost in the mail after the time, or take 2 weeks to get here. Like, we built an app where the guy's going through site and hits the button now, and everything's downloaded, including the number of square meters in the house, straight into the job where it's got to go. Like all those things just eventually, I guess, save time. They also take away mistakes a lot of the time. Like, anything that we can do that stops a human making a typo, it means less times we get a report back and someone says, how did you get a $200,000 air conditioner? Well, someone put a couple extra euros. Anyway, we build enough things in to make sure that doesn't happen. But in the past, it was more able to happen because we didn't have as many controls around that we can, like, our IT systems and our people sitting beside them and can actually help a lot of our quality assurance process. Because rather going back to check if you've checked that, spelt the name properly, if the street name only comes from where the street names come from and it doesn't get a real address automatically by API, you can't stuff it up because it wouldn't work. It'd say it's not a real street. It's been really interesting to watch that, I guess, more that change over time in the way we did it. And as I talk here, I think of the ways I did stuff. I used to drive up the road to bind a report and lick a stamp, Anyway.
We innovate. We progress, don't we? Brad, for the first, 13 years of this business, you weren't the CEO, but you were a director and a shareholder. In the last 7, you've been CEO. What's been the most difficult time you've faced as the CEO of the company in the last 7 years?
So I probably had, I think I was a managing director for about 4 or 5 years before that, because the two partners had sort of, my other 2 partners had got less involved in the business. But the most challenging point, without question, has to be a federal budget change in 2017, where the government says, while I'm at a budget night on a Liberal on a table, because there was negative gearing on the table from the opposition at the time, and the coalition was, so we're not touching negative gearing. And I'm like, negative gearing changing for our business. Let's help them, think about the data of what property investors look like. Anyway, they, in their wisdom, decide to change legislation around what plant and equipment items can be claimed or not claimed in a really unusual way that doesn't make a lot of sense. That meant, I guess, that market for depreciation schedules, there's now a certain percentage of them that may not be worth it. There's still a lot that are, so obviously we're still here. But I had to go back. If I said we grew our business by through education and telling people about something they didn't know about, the headline from that thing was, we're getting rid of the travel allowances, which is the one everyone remembered. And also, we got rid of depreciation on second-hand plant and equipment items. So then people just heard we got rid of depreciation, and then I'd be having these things. You guys still do that? Are you still around? I feel like I went back 15 years in my education of investors and the property industry, the real estate industry, and even some accountants that just heard that as well. So also the number of jobs available, people get scared when things change, and even though they probably still need this report because they bought the property last year, they still get scared because everything's negative. And we had to then go from that May announcement to November. It took them to finalise the legislation. I mean, what do we do with our jobs in between when we're still up in the air? We could be doing them all wrong based on the final legislation, because all we've got is the basic stuff and the draft. So that was a big challenge. We then had to rebuild and spend a lot of time, I guess, IT-wise, on because we built such great coded systems, and it wasn't a simple Excel spreadsheet anymore. You've got to go rebuild it based on, and the legislation changes in bits, but that was a big change, complete change of the reports, how we do them. Are we even doing them right for all that period of time? For ones that have changed after the date, or that have exchanged after that date. And then, there's a few years there of re-education. And if I was starting a business then and trying to grow, that would have been okay. But I remember have to maintain 1 July I'll start again with a new set of rules and lots of people scared and less transactions that have it available. So declining revenues, I had to learn how to run over the next 3 years a business that declined in revenue. And our best year, I said we did about just under 70,000 residential depreciation schedules. And over 3 years, that dropped to the early 40s. Thousands, right?
That's a big change. Yeah.
Stabilised and back to some growth with a bit of COVID whack as you get to the end of the one whack you've already had. That was basically the substantial change. Think of those less number of depreciation schedules. How do we rebuild, re-educate with less people because we've got declining revenue because there's less jobs to do? And so I'd, come out with a few battle scars probably, but and a few more from COVID on the way. But it was not that I wanted again, but it was a very good learning curve for me. And look, my executive team, 2 of them have been with me for 20, 21 and 20 years, or 19 and whatever it is, about 20 years each. So we got back in the trench and we learnt a lot, which has been great. But yes, that legislation change, with the long answer, would probably be my single biggest challenge.
What advice did you get in that time? Because usually in these times where there's a bit of a crisis happening, and that could be considered almost close to existential. That's a 50% drop over a number of years, and that's a huge change to all of your IT systems. About 40. There you go, 40%. Naturally, in those kind of environments, you either tend to look internally to things that worked in the past, or to principles that have held you really firm that you're going to return to, or you look for a sort of external advice from mentors or people who've been through it before. Where did you go, and what did you end up hanging on to that really helped you get through that period in being able to lead the business through?
So there's having been in business for a period of time, there's probably a bunch of people around me that I know, trust, have business discussions with. I don't have a specific mentor. I have a group of CEOs that I get together with on a regular basis every month or so, that we can talk about issues. They were helpful. I've got an exec team that's been working together for 20 years that are all very different, the 3 of us. And so, we had some very interesting times on what do we do about this, what do we do about that. And at the end of the day, we had to get to the bottom of what the rules were, rebuild what we do, and we still have a market of depreciation schedules that's slightly shrunk now, probably by about my shrinking. And so if the pie shrunk a bit, I just need a bit more of it now. And so there's a few people I leaned on through that, absolutely. I would say from a leaning on people perspective, the pandemic is probably almost worse though, because there was so much, like at the end of the day, they changed some legislation. We can't change that. We've got to get on with the job. The pandemic had so much uncertainty in relation to it. That we have another lockdown. We're out of control of these things. How bad could it get? How many people could die? And how do I make sure none of my staff get subjected, especially in the early days, subjected to COVID on my watch? They're going to people's houses. So yeah, true. I probably found some of those things harder because I guess you're, and lockdowns all over this country and lots of painful things. As much as we don't like some of the decisions our politicians have made, and we seem to fight between states, which is a bit embarrassing. But anyway, they also had some pretty hard decisions, and they're dealing with people's lives, and that is probably the much harder part, especially through those early times. And also, transactions dried up to investors substantially, down to about 23% of the transactions or something early in that. So we had another lack of transactions that existed to going to investors. My market shrunk as well at the same time. So you're sort of sitting there going, we can't do our jobs, we're locked down. I've got all this, I've got, 100 and whatever it was staff at the time, 170, 100 whatever. We've got to pay them. We don't get JobKeeper because I think we dropped 27% in that May of our revenue, which is just fantastic.
Oh, wow.
In saying that, we moved the cost base, we worked together, we reduced people's hours, we got people that could do a different job. We had to ring up every inspection that we had organised and cancel and reorganise it again, didn't we? By the way, that's not good for profits, doing the same job 2, 3 or 4 times when you charge $700.
Get paid once.
You do a piece of it 3 times. You should only have to do once. None of those things are great in that respect. But we came through that quite well, and I feel pretty positive. I'm positive towards our decisions in relation to protecting our staff. Did we make the most money we could have through that time? No, but I think we still did all right considering. And we got the team to reduce hours and things. It was like, let's get in this together. And we, most of the way did that fairly well. And not perfectly. Hindsight's wonderful. I go back and change some things now, but with whatever information was with us at the time, we need to make the best decision we can with that information. If there's more information out, we need to be, I guess, agile enough to make another decision, even if that's on the top of the last one. And if that changes, I've got more information, I'm not scared of that. And, I use the word nimble sometimes. That's the one I get laughed at for. And we need to be nimble as a large business, like a small business, and be able to change our mind on things because we've got better information and may make a better decision,
Yeah, which absolutely gets harder as the business gets bigger.
It absolutely does.
And your team has been therefore through quite a lot during that period. How do you think? Oh, okay, I don't want to say the words the other side of COVID because okay, maybe we're not quite there. It seems like
get another wave.
That's right.
So no,
but at least on the other side of the the last couple of rounds of COVID, your team's been through a lot. They've been through probably a rebalancing of the business. They've been through stuff where they haven't been able to get out and see customers. They've seen a shrinking of the market, then maybe regrowing of the market. So they've been through a lot together. Do you feel, how has that impacted culture? Like what are the positive things the team's taken out of that? Do they seem now sort of more battle hardy? Are they more closely connected? Like how's it impacted the team and the culture?
I feel negatively would be my answer to that.
Right.
I don't know that the team, and I'll say the wider team, like my exec team, we're close as ever. We're in a trench together with some tough decisions and tough things to do. Like, up until then, the number of redundancies I've done in this business the whole time was counted on one hand. And we had to do a few and had to go through those processes. Don't like that. And across the board,
it's hard.
Would I say the culture has been impacted in a negative way based on the last period of time? Yes. And part of that's I've had to make some hard decisions because we need to be strong enough to operate and have enough cash to pay the people that got something to do.
That's right.
Tough decisions had to be made. So negative. I don't think, like obviously we've had to shift everybody to working from home. Some people like it, some people don't. Without that debate, do I think that's good for culture in general? No. We've transitioned backwards and forwards. Some people like to and some people don't to work from home. As far as good things for people around people, I think there's a lot of negatives to working from home. I'm not completely against working from home. I don't like it personally that much. We're not allowing everybody to work from home full time unless they've got COVID or a contact or I don't know, 6 other different rules as to whether they can.
You need a full matrix, don't you? Of like every state.
I get another email from HR with the new rules. Where do I have to wear a mask? Where do I not wear a mask? I don't even know anywhere anymore. We're still wearing them in our office if you're not sitting at your desk, just to try to. So we've always gone above the rules of the state that we've been allowed to try to be a bit safer, I suppose, which is one way for me to, I guess, look at the culture and morale as best we can. Being let's try to protect our people, number one.
Yeah.
Look, I've had probably worse percentage of staff turnover of late, and we're on the back of between legislation change and that pandemic and a few other things. You've got to try and keep your wages at reasonable levels, and that's hard, especially in a lot of current markets where we haven't had immigration for a period of time. There's not, I don't think I'm the only business owner saying it's a little hard to get staff at the moment. I've got 25 odd available positions in my organisation at the moment on a staff base of 180. So that's a challenge in trying to get through the jobs. But I'm also, in looking at next year, I'm also adding some additional ones to that for growth, because we've got more transactions coming and we like to take it on here where we can. And if the transaction numbers are there, and we're not the fastest as good as we've been all of our times because of lacking staff and pandemics, and it's not all my fault. But the BMT that got to where it is through some of those difficulties, it's been hard to be as good as we've ever been. We're recognising that. We're coming through that while we're rolling into our busy part of the year. We will get to the end of that, and I will take it on harder and make sure we adjust to get the people we need to adjust. And that will be a bit of an exercise that might be expensive, but that's okay. Done it before, been through some hard times like those before. If the transactions are there, the pie gets bigger. I also want a bit more of it, I suppose, on the other side.
Yeah, geez, what a journey for your team. And when you think back on this journey as a CEO of this organisation, Brad, that you've been part of for such a long time, what are you proudest of?
I go to a Christmas party and I look at the number of people that we employ. When I see their families, even though they don't come to the Christmas parties anymore because they're too big, we can't find anywhere to fit us all. That's that easy or not cost inhibitive. And see, I guess, the impact that we've had on so many people's lives, and we do. We've given them a job. It's been pretty secure on the way through until some really hard times. We do let go of people if we decide to part ways on the way through, of course, but we've always been able to maintain paying them all the time, giving them a job, supporting them with their families as best we can while running a business. And I guess my answer is my people, probably. I look at some people that started with me X number of years ago as not knowing how to do anything, that have done well in life in some way. And that doesn't just mean financially. They've come from, they've come out of school, whatever they've done in the past. They may not be the top of the class. They may not be whatever, but we've got them. They've gone through degrees with us. They've got good at that. They're good at something in our organisation, and I feel like they're a different person. And maybe my organisation and I had some impact on that, I suppose. The people would be the biggest. It's been a great learning curve for me as well. I was the first staff member in this business. I didn't own it, didn't start it, came in soon. And I've learned so much on the way, how to grow a business, how to, run a shrinking one, a slightly shrinking one. And I've actually had a lot
fundamentally,
of fun.
you would have had to have continued to level up yourself to be able to, to manage and lead a growing organization. Having a business that's got 5 staff to a business that's got 180 staff is a very different leadership job.
Absolutely.
You have to learn a hell of a lot and continue to put yourself, out of that comfort zone so that you're in a learning space, because otherwise the business stops growing because you stop growing.
And sometimes I guess, and you're exactly right. You need to read, understand, learn, put people around you that know how to do things better than you do, as best you can, so that, you actually get somewhere and don't. One thing that's been, I guess, pretty important is we've got 3 in an exec team, and I may be the boss, but we don't just do everything I want to do. The only time I get to make a decision is when they don't want to. Otherwise, we battle out what's best for the business with 3 very different people, and that's a big positive. So I've enjoyed working around those people as well. And I got a lot of support around from an industry point of view, with people that we do work with or don't work with that have done things that I just try to make sure most of my time spent outside with clients that I can also learn from, I suppose, clients and referral partners.
So where do you hope then, Brad, the business will be in 3 years? I mean, obviously we've been in a very uncertain time, and we're still in an uncertain time, but hopefully borders are starting to open back up. We're starting to get, think there's a bit of sort of tailwind at the moment, it feels like, in the majority of ways. But what are you hoping the business looks like in 3 years from now?
So we, after these couple of things that have been dealt to us, we took that drop, we stabilised, and we've actually gone okay through a pandemic. Some rough times on the way. We need to reset or align to make sure we're doing a lot of the things as good as we did before we dealt those challenges. The way we got there and got to where we are in the first place, and having the market share, etc. I've got a bit of work to do on that. That's not 3 years of work, and the increasing transactions giving me some comfort in spending a bit on that, probably more than I have in the last 3 or 4 years, and so we'll do that. That is, that's not foreign to me and my team. We're just trying to make the right decision at the right time so we get a result, I suppose. And then look, our commercial numbers have had fantastic growth over the last little while. Love to see that continue. There's not as many transactions around in non-residential stuff. We still do quite good numbers. Like to continue that good growth path. Otherwise, I am going to get to a point with this business as the transactions get to a level, and with the changes to legislation, that there's only a certain number of depreciation changes I can do. I can't have 100% of the market. Growth becomes harder, or probably started to, and then the market shrunk, I suppose. Hence, we shrunk a bit along with it. Now, I think I'm understanding of that. That probably we started looking at a few years ago, the other things that we can do alongside this, things that don't damage our brand. We don't have conflicts with the channels outside of just doing depreciation schedules. I like doing those, but we can do those. We started shoring up a few years ago with some additional management structure in order to keep that to hum along and run as a business with the involvement, and look at the other things that we would like to do alongside that. We've been slowed down on that trajectory, and in the next, the next 3 to 5 years, what are those things, and let's get moving on them, is what I'd love to do the most.
Yeah, I love that. It continues your sort of innovate or die. Like, as you said, unfortunately, there is a limit to the market and the amount of that market you can have, but it doesn't have to be that your growth is limited, but it does require some innovation and new thinking.
And it needs to be like, if you had every loan in Australia as a lender, you can't grow, right? You've just got to work out the other things that fit alongside that and fit with our business. And there's a few changes afoot that but we've been in the spot where we've kind of come through a lot of this with some back to growth position, so we can have a bit more confidence on spending into the future, I suppose. There's a bit of making sure that you can get through uncertain times with pandemics running around the world, and wars breaking out, and it's been interesting. So
It's keeping you on your toes, mate.
Yes.
Well, I've got one last question for you, Brad, and I ask every founder or CEO this question. And I want you to go sort of right out. Okay, we're out at 3 years. I want you to go much further out into the future, right out to your yearning years, for want of a better word. A bit more grey hair. You've done all the business building that you wanted to do. Excuse me. You've created the impact that you really wanted to have in your business career, and you've got the CEO of the global largest community of first-time founders. People who haven't done what they've done before, so they haven't built a business bigger than the one they're in. They're all super hungry and keen to get those real gems from founders or CEOs who've really been able to take a business and scale it. And she asks you to finish this sentence. She says, what are the 3 things above all else that you've got to get right as a founder or CEO if you want to scale your business? What would be those 3 things for you that you must get right?
3 things must get right
to scale.
To me, the simplest business plan I have. It's almost just my business plan. It's not quite, but it's a little bit difficult. It comes down to 3 words: define, refine, define, refine, validate, replicate. That's what we've done in our business. Go learn how to do a good depreciation schedule. Get better at it. Make sure it makes profit so you can do it, and then do heaps of them.
I love that.
You know, follow the Brad Beer very simple business plan. Look, and this is probably not a scale thing. This is a so you're balanced in your life thing. My family is very important to me. I have 4 little kids that are 7 down to less than 1. And if I look at my life from what I grew up, I grew up in a house with, no money. You didn't ask for stuff. Dad was an Aleco, mum didn't work, 4 kids in a country town. My mates are still my mates from then. And I think the things that are important to you need to remain important to you and not change those things. I could probably scale up without doing those things, I suppose. So maybe that's not a good answer for this. But if you lose sight of who you are, you won't be real anymore. And I think I'm still very real in relation to the mates I have. Yeah, I drink nice wine and I go to better restaurants than I'd ever knew we existed when I was 15 years old, I suppose. But I still think that I've got a lot of similarities and traits that are still the same me in some ways, even though, obviously you have to change in order to do some things, but I don't think the core's changed too much, I suppose. So the simple business plan, the balance, and I guess that one word is balance, and balancing the family life. 3, looking after your people. The people are the asset in the business. I'm pretty good at pounding the pavement. I'm pretty good at, being liked by people, and people often buy depreciation schedules from me because we do them well. But I can't beat a whole bunch of people. I can't beat 20 guys on the phone asking the same question. They're the people that make this business happen. If I don't look after those properly, then you won't have a business, and you'll have a job, and you'll have something very different. So how do you share with them? How do you make sure they're happy and delivering the experiences that you need to in order to have the successful business? And helping you with that simple business plan. They're very long answers, but
that's perfect. That's perfect. Thank you so much, Brad. Brad, I'd love to acknowledge the way that the way that you talk about the business. I've heard you on podcasts and stuff over years, and I've always felt that authenticity from you in terms of the way you engage with the business, the sort of the humanity that exists in this business and that's existed in the culture. And I really appreciate the way that you've shared with us the challenges that the business has been through, because it's very easy for people to sort of chest beat and we're the biggest and we're the best, but actually it's been a real journey, both for you and the other founders and the business and your people. But what I think is not lost on me is the simplicity of that business plan. As you said, if people are trying to build, particularly those people trying to build a services organization, the define, the refine, validate and then replicate. We had a similar founder not long ago on the podcast, Mark Maley, who built ProTech to 4,000 staff, and it was just as simple a business plan. All my customers care about is having the highest quality person rock up on their site every day. So they re-engineered the entire business to make sure that happened every single time. Just another services business, but super simple business plan, but for exactly the same purpose and the same concept. So I think there's a lot for people to learn in that. And so I really appreciate your time today, Brad. That's been super. Folks, I'm sure you've got a huge amount of value from the time you've had with Brad today. Brad, how should people get in touch or follow along with what BMT's doing if they kind of want to stay engaged?
Look, my website's got information. We're here. Talk to us about things. Our social media's got its things you do, but I don't know. The website's about depreciation schedules, not necessarily about the journey. So, these podcasts and things like this are quite different to most of the things I do, because I'm normally, the depreciation expert. But I like this. I like these things because they also make you go back and think about the previous years, and it makes you look at some of the things that you've done. You also think about how you got there, and it makes you rethink your plan going forward a little bit, so it's been good.
Well, thanks for reflecting collaboratively with us today, Brad. Folks, before you go, if you've enjoyed today, which I'm sure you will, a big thanks to Brad Beer from BMT. You can jump on the scaleupspodcast.com website. If you want to drop your email there, you'll find out about episodes about to come up. If you subscribe, and of course, like or rate us a review, our team would absolutely love that. It helps it get into the hands of more people and helps other people get the learnings that you just heard Brad share into new hands. If you like the socials, you can find us on all the socials. We're on @ScaleUpsPodcast on pretty much anything you like except Twitter. Just can't get my head around Twitter. Just don't love it enough to spend any time there. And so to everybody listening today, let's just remember one thing before you go today. As you think about Brad's journey, there's been a time here where actually Brad's team could have just packed it in because it got really hard. And it's very easy to want to get off the train when things are getting hard, when you're in the scale up process. And the one thing you can guarantee is that if you give up, that's the absolutely only way that you can guarantee that you won't be able to scale up is by giving up. So you've got to stay unshakable in your faith that you're going to get there. You've got to continue to adapt and evolve. And let's not use the word pivot, but just to stay engaged and keep moving and remain flexible in your approach. You've been listening to the Scale Ups podcast. I'm your host, Sean Steele. Look forward to speaking with you again next week. Thank you so much, Brad.
Thank you.
G'day everyone, just a couple of quick things before you go. If you have questions that you'd love myself or an upcoming guest to tackle about challenges that you're facing in scaling your business, please just jump straight on the website, scaleupspodcast.com. You can record your message straight from your mobile by hitting the button on the right-hand side of the page, or you can just email them the old-fashioned way, questions@scaleupspodcast.com. And just a quick reminder, nothing we spoke about today constitutes financial or business advice. If you are considering making big decisions in your business, seek out a professional who can look at your situation in detail and make sure you're getting sound, personalised advice. Thanks for listening. Look forward to being back in your podcast feed next week.